find that specifically to be very difficult, or did you find it more, like a challenge that you relished?
I mean, jumping from the first season into a prequel.
Exactly.
That was hugely challenging physically.
Yeah.
Because, the reason why we went back to a prequel after our first season was because Andy Whitfield was diagnosed with cancer. And his treatment plan meant that he was going to be out for a year. And so in order to save the show, the writers wrote the prequel. And then they sent the drafts to us, and I read Crixus. A long-haired slave is dragged into a courtyard. His head is pulled back to reveal Crixus. And I sort of looked at his character, and it was like, he'd come from the mines. So there's no way that he could have had the physical buffness that I kind of worked on very hard for the first season to be Crixus, because Crixus was like a war machine. The first one, I wanted to play him like a machine. I wanted him to be. One of the interesting things about the first season was when I was in high school, there was a guy called Matthew Sisley. Matt, I'm saying your name out loud in Dubai. I wish you were here to hear that. Anyway, him and I were like the archetypal opposites in high school. I wore gel in my hair and did breakdancing and all this sort of stuff. And this guy had like a mullet haircut and wore death metal t-shirts and was always driving around this little red car of his. And him and I were like opposites. And we were face to face all the time, like about to have a fight all the time. And we couldn't have disliked each other anymore. Now, when my mother was killed in that car accident, I woke up a week later from a coma in a hospital. He was in my hospital room. My worst enemy was in my hospital room. And he came up and he put his arm on me and he said, "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry." And from that point onwards, he's the only person from my high school that I really stay in contact with. Every year, ring him on his birthday, he rings me on mine. I was best man at his wedding. But when I read the Crixus Spartacus storyline, I just that life experience I had with this guy resonated in it. And so the first scenes when I was playing Crixus with the buff kind of, I imagine he had a mullet. It was kind of like Matthew Sisley. I knew he had to be the antagonist to the protagonist, and I really wanted to make him completely unlikable and to be that sort of force that people would be kind of like, because I knew that the best transition that I could make in this series that would have an impact upon the audience was to go from being the person everybody hated and loathed and thought was evil to becoming somebody that they could actually love and appreciate, because that's what this story is all about, really. It's about, you just don't know enough about other people to really understand where they're at, and if you can go through that arc of hating them to actually realizing the qualities of them that makes you endear yourself to them, that's the human change situation that our, the story itself tries to embody in a way, But,
I think it made it much more effective.
Yeah, oh yeah. My producer came to me after the second episode of season 1 and said, "Manu, what are you doing? We hate this guy. I don't like Crixus, I don't like, and he has to be in a love story in the next episode with Navia." And I said, "Just let that story happen all by itself. Please, Bob, just trust me on this. Just let that story happen and let the audience go through him having this experience with a woman. And we'll just play it off as its own storyline. But let me stay in this world of a contained animal in a do-or-die situation in a gladiator school where you can't afford to show emotion. If you're in a prison here or in anywhere in the world, these scenarios are serious. You've really got to sort of live in a certain way just to survive. Yet, quiet corners, and you can reflect upon your own life and your own experience. You get to see something of these people, and this is where the corners of the world still stand divided by not being able to see into those rooms enough. You know what I mean? Hopefully I represent Maori well enough so that people might have an idea of Maori that's slightly different to, stereotype or something. You know what I mean? Like it's all about
Thank
that.
you so
I
much
hope
for
I'm answering your question. But yes, changing weight and doing that sort of thing during that process was very tough, but also a great challenge.
Thank you so much for coming to Dubai.
Thank you.
Hello.
Who are you? What character is that? It's fantastic.
I'm sure you.
I just want to know who it is.
I'm doing this for one day. I can't see how you put all that armor and stuff every day.
He's been using the hair gel that you had when you was a kid.
This is the guy.
Anyway, I have two small questions about Spartacus. First, you've been there through all 4 seasons, from the beginning to like, a while ago, and you've seen a lot of characters come and go. Other than Crixus, you've seen them all. Would you like to play something else on Spartacus? Would that have been appealing to you?
I actually read for Doctore in one of the original castings that I went for, and they were going to fly me over to screen test for Barker. Remember Barker? Yeah. Yeah, they were going to fly me over to the States to do a screen test for Barker, and I was all excited. I was like, oh great, I've got a chance at this show. And then they came back and they said, no, they're going to cast Barker. At the time I was living in Australia, and they decided that Barker was going to die in episode 4 or 5 or 6, I don't know. And they decided that because he was going to die so early on in the series, that they'd just cast him locally out of New Zealand. So they rang up and said, no, unfortunately you've lost that role. And so I thought it was all over. I didn't think I'd get another shot at any other character. Then I was, phoned up and asked whether I'd try out for Crixus. And, even on that level, a little story to tell you was that, when I went in for my screen test for Crixus, this producer had an argument with my manager, and they cancelled my screen test. And they said, no, it's over. Unfortunately, your managers screwed this up. It's all over. And I walked out, and then I rang my manager and I said, please, whatever happened, you've got to ring up and apologise and do whatever, because this is my opportunity. And it almost went. I was walking away from this casting studio, and then a few people had conversations, and whoever it was that was on their high horse, and, whatever, it got resolved, and they rang up and they said, okay, Manu, come back and do your screen test. So I went back, and I'm sort of under the pressure of actually feeling very emotional about having just been kicked out of the studio because of this problem. I had to go back in there and nail it, but I nailed it. I knew after that audition for Crixus, I knew I had it. I just went in there and I went bang. And I walked out and I went ah. It was a letter, I just get it.
Second question.
But if I could have said Jupiter's cock once in the whole series, I wish it. I asked the directors whether I could do that one time in the last series, but there wasn't an opportunity. There almost was, but they said no.
I was asked to ask you this. There's a lot throughout the series, almost all the time. There are a lot of explicit scenes. How do these things happen on the set when you're always fighting, doing stuff, and then you have to do that suddenly? How do these scenes get filmed? What happens?
You may not have noticed, but Crixus wasn't in that many orgy scenes. I wasn't. I mean, all that stuff was getting filmed, and I'd walk in and go like, how'd it go?
You didn't think he'd wandered in on a really weird party or something, no?
I was just never there. Honestly, the scenes with Lucy Lawrence. Lucy's such a professional, and she's married to the producer. So, look, Spartacus was just one of those shows. If it ended up being some corny series that people didn't like, and we felt that we were not under the leadership of good writers and good producers and good directors and good production quality, then we might have started doubting why we were putting so much into it. But the thing is we put a lot into it, and what we put into it is what people really got involved with. It was the extremes that we went to. It was I can't tell you how many times I ended up down at the local emergency ward with my knuckles cut open, or I broke 3 ribs in a fight scene one season, and at one stage they didn't swap a sword out, and the guy slashed me across the chest and cut my pectoral muscle right open. I've got a scar across my chest here. The fight scenes, we were proud of ourselves, proud of the stunt team, that we used to go into these scenes with so much passion. And you probably could never have done it the way we did it in America, because there would have been lawsuits going on left, right, and centre. But in New Zealand, we were just a bunch of, guys down in the southern hemisphere where people weren't watching that closely, just sort of relishing in this stuff, And there were many times during our seasons where we did this haka together, or we did the gladiator boot camp, which always preceded our seasons, and the physical passion involved in our show was. I really don't know of many other shows that you compare to ours that would have had as much physical dedication. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Zoom lens.
Look at that, straight up.
So was it not like your people were like losing arms? It's just a flesh wound, mate. No,
Don't worry, I'll carry on.
She's an avid Spartacus fan.
Okay.
First of all, I have a question. What's it like working with Stephen Mel and Jeff Jones? Stephen Amell.
Stephen Amell, yeah, right. On Arrow, Stephen read for Spartacus. He came down. He was one of the 4 actors that were flown down to New Zealand to read for Spartacus after Andy Whitfield agreed that he wanted the show to go on, and we had to find a new Spartacus. Stephen was a bit nervous when he came to New Zealand, and he was under pressure. And there's so many things that can affect you, in an audition situation. I think he was affected, just didn't give his best performance, so he didn't get the role. But now that I'm working with him on Arrow, he has a very unique acting style where he's a thinker, And I said this in an interview earlier. I said that he takes this moment to think, and then he responds. And usually camera time is so important, and people who pause a long time before their lines, the director will come on and say, "Can we get a move on? Can you not leave such big gaps?" But Stephen does it in a way that's just part of his style. And so whenever he does a scene, he just sort of thinks and then he says something. He's a very conscientious young actor. I've worked with some other people who I can't name and I won't name, but who have the look complex. Steve's got this great look. He's a great looking young guy, and sometimes that affects personality, because just the way you're used to growing up, looks give you a certain reaction in public. Beautiful women, beautiful men, whatever. You can be almost sort of constrained in your own ability to grow because society treats you in a certain way because of your good look. And he's got that, and he lives with that, but he's very, very professional, and he's been a wonderful person to work opposite. At first, it was a little bit, toing and froing. I think for him it was a challenge because he read us opposite me in the Spartacus screen test. So I think, in his own ego and his own sort of self, he was thinking, oh, this guy's come on, I missed out on that role, so I'm a bit embarrassed about that, but now I've got to, pick it up against this guy now. But it was the perfect equation, really. Me coming on as Deathstroke was me coming on as what he knew as Crixus and he read with. So I was coming in with this energy that really challenged him, and now him and I are kind of like having this really great acting energy opposite each other because we're both intuitively tuning in to make it better all the time. You know what I mean? And it's part of that.
Sort of a rivalry thing, right?
Rivaling is good when the competition is healthy. And yes, it is that, but it's healthy competition. It's not driven by the ego; it's driven by realization.
And how long will it be until we see Deathstroke again?
Well, I'm playing Slade Wilson, and Slade Wilson is AKA Deathstroke, but the writers are keeping a very tight lid on any development into the Deathstroke territory. But all I can say is wait for next season. I've been given a bit of an insight into season 2 of Arrow, and it's going to give me a lot more opportunity to sort of do what I love doing, which is acting and getting screen time. And I might come back to the future, the Starling City. So I might.